seen, I think, fruitfully in two perspectives. Excuse me, let me take this.
You want to repeat what?
Right. Shall I put on all of these things? Yes. The question is, how do one conceive of the foreign debt, seen as the major enemy in South America? Is it a new form of colonialism, or what is it? Yes, it is a new form of colonialism in a very particular sense. It is designed, I think, essentially to force you not to become self-reliant, but to participate in the international economy. And it is the exact homological element corresponding to what Britain did. When Britain struggled against slavery, it was partly in order to reintroduce it as plantation economy in the colonies in Africa. Now, what Britain wanted was to have the Africans pay taxes. But in order for them to pay taxes, they first had to make the Africans indebted. In order to make them indebted, they protected them and then levied taxes and said, in order for you to pay these taxes, we have a very good arrangement called a plantation, where you can earn cash. The foreign debt has the same function. The thing that the center of the economic system is most afraid of is self-reliance, because it doesn't give the leverage for penetration. Self-reliance being their major enemy. They're much more afraid of that than of socialism, because socialist economies participate often quite willingly in the international economy and are also among the best people to pay their debts. Whereas self-reliance means that you participate only that much and only on your own condition. Now, that is one aspect. The second aspect of it, historically, is that United States banks perhaps were among the only people in the world who believed in the new international economic order. They thought that there would be almost unlimited supply to recycle, and that any country would follow the trick of the OPEC countries. Now, in that way, they made enormous mistakes, which speaks very badly of their intellectual insight. My own conclusion, if you want to have it, is exactly the same conclusion as a leading economist in your country. When the question is, shall we pay the debt or no, or not? Just no. Just no. And I think that's coming. It is coming from Brazil in its way. It is coming from Peru in another way. It is burning underneath in Mexico, and so on.
You referred to municipalities being a model, and my mind immediately jumped to Chicago, Illinois, Cicero, Illinois, and those not being such great models for...
Which model did you mention?
I mentioned Chicago, Illinois, and
Yeah.
Illinois,
In Crook County. Of the 3,300 counties in the U.S., some would be better, at least than others. And I think both Cook County and Dade County would have problems. I agree with you. But then look at the other hand, at the other extreme, so to speak, Santa Cruz. But the number of citizens' organizations with very imaginative ideas about how to relate to other countries' municipalities, and you see it. I think this is a concrete struggle, and it has to do with the demonopolization of foreign policy.
James Spalding, wouldn't you say that Richard Dixon, the Quaker, is an example of hard Quakerism, and that Chilenism in Japan, which is so nationalistic, is a good example of hard Buddhism?
What was the last one?
Chilenism, or Soka Gakkai,
Yeah.
very nationalistic.
You took Richard Nixon first. Did you say Dixon or Nixon?
Dixon.
Yes.
Quaker.
Yes, it's hard Quakerism. The Quakers disavow him, say that he was a very peripheral member. I can understand that.
I know many such Quakers.
Yeah, I agree with that. As a matter of fact, it goes on the very beginning in the history of Pennsylvania.
Farther west you go, the more it becomes that.
Yes, exactly, and this was a westward case. Now, when it comes to Soka Gakkai, I'm not so sure. You see, Buddhism does not have built into it violent self-righteousness. In Buddhism, the big dilemma in Buddhism is between what you could call a soft religion and nothing, a kind of ornamentalism. And I can imagine considerably worse forms of foreign policy than what Ikeda Daisaku engages in. I think actually his schemes are relatively viable. Now the thing to watch out for in Japan is not Soka Gakkai, but it is state Shinto. And that's an extremely dangerous creed constructed out of the more nature-oriented soft Shinto that had existed before, building on the idea of the Japanese as a chosen people, chosen by the sun goddess Amaterasu Okami, who took her abode in the Japanese Tenno, and with the doctrine referred to as Hakko Ichio. Hakko meaning the 8 corners of the world, and Ichio under one roof. Now that was the one that was picked up by the Japanese military in 1931 when they started the Pacific War, and then continued it in their madness, also attacking another chosen people, the US. So you see, what Buddhism did in that case, I think Buddhism should be accused of. They did not stand up. There were cases of sort of very soft individual resistance, but no ability to stand up against it. Not because they condoned or they were cruel or things of that kind, but they didn't have the inner fiber of individual resistance.
We have had a song a few years ago in the United States, "Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way." But anyway, that is what I'm asking. It's this, that for pragmatic reasons, also Norquist is my name, I'm from Wisconsin.
Sounds Swedish.
Yeah, I'm partly Norwegian, by the way.
Even better. Yep.
Great blessing.
Don't say, I agree with you, but don't say it so loudly. That's the, you know how these people are. Yeah.
The question I have has to do with the fact that it's true. It's because our government saw a chance of perhaps making China counterpoint to the Russian power when they normalized relations with China, but it was partly for pragmatic reasons. States can now and then act on the basis of pragmatic reasons, and there are many people in the United States who believe very strongly that we should normalize relations not only with Russia, but Lord knows with Cuba and with little Nicaragua and so forth, instead of trying to make Grenada's out of all of them. What do you think of the possibility of normalizing relations, perhaps with the window of opportunity opening with Glasnost, and also with the disgrace of the Reagan administration?
Well, what I think is that the theology has very much to do with it. And that the United States was born in 1620 in the Plymouth colony. What happened in 1607 was more commercial, and got an ideology from the very beginning where there was not only a chosen people in the promised land, but there was also an enemy. And the thesis has been put by many, and I subscribe to it, that there is a hard aspect of the US that seems to need an enemy. Now, why should those who are so powerful need an enemy? Well, let's give 2 good reasons immediately. Or 3. If you have an enemy, you have a universal explanation whenever something goes wrong. It's due to the enemy and his machinations all over. Number two, the enemy makes you pull yourself together and exert yourself and do your very best, because otherwise he'll take over. And number three, the enemy provides you with a basis of comparison. The sentence that we all know when something critical is being said of Washington's policy, and the guy who stands up in the audience, do you think Soviet Union is any better? And I usually react when I hear that question saying, you cannot be a good American, my friend. Are you really seriously meaning that you're taking the Soviet Union as the standard against which you are judging your own country? You must be a very, very bad American. Now, there is a point in that. Of course, it's rhetorical on my side, but there is a point in it. And the point is that by having an enemy, you have a basis against which you can try to convince yourself that you don't look so bad. Now, the Soviet Union uses the United States exactly the same way. So when you go to meetings in Moscow, right now, the Russians are more right than the Americans. If you go back to Stalin's times, it was the other way around, by reasonably objective measures. So when I'm arguing, you see that it's the whole metaphor that has to be debated. I'm so taken in by the soft Christian idea of a universe without Satan. There is the evil in us, there is the temptation and all that, but we can overcome it, and we can discuss it. And San Francisco can go to the wolf and say, Brother Wolf, you've been very bad, but you need food. And he can go to the citizens of Gubbio and say, brother and sister citizens, you've been very bad against that nice wolf, but I have talked with him, why don't you disarm? So the citizens disarm and they bring food to the wolf, and Brother Wolf, sister and brother citizens, and St. Francis live together peacefully. Geneva disarmament and World Food Hunger Program all rolled into one. Of course, it could be interesting to hear the wolf's point of view and the Gubbio people's point of view. We don't hear much about that. But anyhow, there is something there. So I return a little bit to the metaphysical and metaphorical. Of course, I agree with you. United States could make friend with Nicaragua immediately. You could make a beautiful Nicaragua. And you could, if you are a capitalist in this country, you could reflect on one simple thing. Could it be that socialism is a way that brings 90% of the population into the market instead of only 10%? At a poorer level, but there might be interest in some American goods afterwards if you still are able to produce good goods. Now, if in the meantime you don't know how to do it, they'll buy Japanese instead, and after that Korean and Taiwanese. Okay, ultimately they might even end up buying something Norwegian, although I'm not quite sure what that would be. You could do that, and you could learn from Nicaragua how to combine Christianity and social reform. It's a deeply Christian country like this one, only that they have theology of liberation instead of theology of repression.
My name is Mike Woodard. I would like to ask you a question about the example of the group that has to fill the gulf between the oppressed and the oppressor. I work with some oppressed people, poor people in the South. And what I find is that they don't want to be liberated, they want to become oppressors more often than not. I mean, they want to become consumers. I have a problem with that because my theology tells me that I have to listen to the oppressed and not go off on my own tangent. So how does one who finds him or herself standing in that gulf, trying to stand in that gulf, relate not only to the oppressor, but also to the oppressed who wants to imitate the oppressor?
You put your finger, I think, at a very, very difficult one. I would say through dialogue, maybe through patience, maybe by bringing in examples, discussing it up and down. I pointed to a little bit the danger of the in-between group perhaps allying itself more with the oppressor than the oppressed, objectively. The oppressed have all rights to be suspicious of that. All rights to do that. Gandhi's answer was, I could say, simple, maybe a little bit dogmatic, but very important. The only way in which you have a right to fight on behalf of the oppressed is by becoming a part of them. You share the conditions completely, with no mental reservations, nothing. My reaction to it, having participated in quite a lot of such struggles, is that Gandhi perhaps underestimates the extent to which he was nevertheless Gandhi. He could live like a Harijan, and yet just the English he spoke, his manners, even if he were what Churchill referred to as a naked fakir, was of such a kind that it conveyed and communicated with the British. I'll just say we have a problem, and I don't think there is any simple solution, but one has to confront it in a very honest way.
Doctor, if it's all right.
Yeah, but there is one particularly impatient arm down there.
Well, then we also will have one other impatient
Absolutely,
arm.
absolutely.
And then we'll have to close.
I didn't say there were not others, I'm just watching the... Yeah.
Refrain from long questions, but it's simply as to what does the presence or the operation of the Central Intelligence Agency in the United States and intelligence in general, how does that apply in terms of the powers of the state to wage war? We know that the CIA operates their black budget parts of the Pentagon that are not even known to Congress. Those kinds of operations are carried on without any discussion or approval or even knowledge in the case of what's happening.
If United States is selected by God to bring Pax Americana to the world, United States has to take on God-like characteristics. Now, God has three major characteristics: omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. CIA takes care of the omniscience aspect, together with NSA, the National Security Agency. When it comes to the omnipotence, you have Pentagon and CIA in its destabilizing role. When it comes to omnipresence, you have the transnational corporations and the fact that Americans are found everywhere, many of them being CIA in disguise. So I think the problem of it is that from the point of view of the elites in this country, this is not only something that the US happens to do. It's not only something US is entitled to do as a big power, but it is something the US has a duty to do. Because by not doing it, it would in fact abdicate from its special position in the great chain of being, as defined by John Winthrop and successors. If you think CIA is a problem, I will recommend to you to read the report from the Christic Institute in Washington on what is going on in this country. And all I can say is the old Malayan joke when the judge said to the lawyer defending a criminal who had done unspeakable crimes, "What do you have to say in his defense?" And the lawyer said, "Nothing, Your Honor, except his brother is even worse." So you'll see a sort of underground government consisting of escapees from Cuba in 1959, allied with retired CIA and retired military, and quite often used by the official Washington establishment. The word, let me just point it out, because if a person is still operating inside CIA, he is somehow institutionally steered. And the same for retired general, admiral. The moment he is outside, he is no longer institutionally controlled, but he has all the skills and connections.
We got a
So-
few on our side, too.
Yes, we have La Rocque on our side, Secord on the other. Retired generals are very useful for the peace movement. That is an argument for lowering the retirement age.
I'd like to ask you whether you really believe that we have abolished the empires. Perhaps empires in the traditional sense, yes, but certainly in today's world, they are manifestations of new empires, which raises fundamental questions about this image of the peaceful world, and I'm glad you call it an image. Because of the existence of the empires, I don't know whether the nation-state concept or that the nation-states themselves are in a position to regulate power. I question whether nation-states are genuinely independent. I question the nation-states' ability, particularly those from the South, to be able to fight what I would call the hegemony of the superpowers, and in that sense, East and West are both alike, or more in particular, Soviet Union and the United States have some patterns of behavior when it comes to international affairs, when it comes to the way they view their relationship with regard to the developing countries. The other empire I would mention would be the transnational corporations, which do have all these four dimensions that you talk about: military aspect, economic aspect, cultural aspect, political aspect. So it seems to me that we have to identify perhaps the enemies clearly if we are able to do something about them structurally.
I agree with every word on that, and you give me an occasion to spell out some things that I glossed over too quickly. The four empires that came in after the 12 had been abolished were United States Empire, Soviet Union Empire. You know, Russia was almost nothing in 1917, 18. The European Community as an economic empire, and Japan as an economic empire. Nevertheless, I would put it down as important, because those 12 empires were more than just colonialism, you see. It was also a way of hegemonial organization of the world, steered by one superstate. So the fact that we were able to overcome 12 of them, even if it were with that minus, I count as a plus. Now, point two, the European community, ASEAN, and the Nordic countries are all of them examples of how nations can come together to try to limit the power of the superpowers. So that's one mechanism which the South is trying to come to grips with. But it is difficult. You have to have resources of various kinds. And at this point, we have to remember that most of the countries in the South are from 1960. We are only 27 years after that. It takes a little bit more time. The transnational corporation, I of course entirely agree with you. And they are exactly the opposite of economic self-reliance. They are division of labor with some countries on top and some at the bottom. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't imagine transnational corporations in the service of humanity, producing, for instance, inexpensive food, nutritious, inexpensive housing. And there are efforts to do this, but very difficult to reconcile with a profit motive and a market mechanism. These are very, very real difficulties. The scheme is set up in such a way as to try to handle the problems that you point to, but should be made much more explicit. Read a forthcoming book when it comes. Let me put it that way. Thank you so much.